The Spiritual Laws of Wealth. Introduction. When we think of wealth, we often imagine overflowing treasuries, palaces lined with gold, or the modern equivalent, bank accounts with numbers so vast they hardly seem real. But history tells us something far more mysterious. Around the 10th century before Christ, a young king stood at the threshold of power. His name was Solomon, son of David, heir to a throne in Jerusalem. And according to the ancient record, one night a divine voice asked him a question most of us secretly dream of hearing. "Ask what you wish me to give you." What would you have asked for? More years of life? Victory over enemies? Riches beyond imagination? Solomon asked for none of these. He asked for wisdom, an understanding heart to judge rightly, to discern between good and evil. The story tells us that this request pleased God, and that because Solomon asked not for riches but for wisdom, he received both. In time, his fame spread so widely that rulers traveled from distant kingdoms to hear his words. Gold flowed into his city until it was said that silver was considered of little value. And yet the true treasure was not the metal, it was the wisdom that attracted it. This is the paradox at the heart of our journey. Solomon did not chase wealth, yet wealth came to him. He did not grasp for abundance, yet abundance overflowed. What if prosperity is not something you run after at all, but something you become aligned with? Consider the contrast with our world today. We live in an age of urgency. Every headline promises a shortcut. Every advertisement whispers that happiness can be bought. People run from one scheme to another, hoping for overnight success, and yet anxiety increases, not abundance. We are richer in information, but poorer in peace. We have more methods than ever before, and yet the foundations of society tremble under debt, corruption, and mistrust. It is as though the faster we run, the further true prosperity slips from our grasp. This audiobook is not about formulas to make quick money. It is about rediscovering the spiritual laws that underlie all abundance, laws that Solomon lived by, laws that philosophers from Seneca to Confucius echoed, laws that remain unchanged beneath the shifting surface of history. These are not fanciful ideas. They are as real as the rise and fall of empires. For what toppled Rome was not a lack of wealth, but a lack of wisdom. And what built nations that flourished was not luck, but the steady foundation of justice, diligence, and humility. The promise before you is simple, though not easy. If you align yourself with these laws, prosperity follows as naturally as harvest follows planting. But if you resist them, no matter how many riches you accumulate, emptiness will gnaw at the edges of your life. Wealth without spirit is a gilded cage. Wealth with spirit is freedom. As we begin, I ask you a question that will return again and again. What if the greatest fortune of your life is already within you, waiting not to be found, but to be awakened? What if wisdom, gratitude, justice, humility, and generosity are not moral decorations, but the hidden engines of prosperity? This is the journey we are about to take together, a journey through 10 spiritual laws of wealth. Each chapter will reveal one law, not as theory, but as a living truth reflected in history, scripture, and the lives of those who dared to align with it. At the end, you will see that Solomon's prosperity was not a miracle for one man in a faraway age. It is a mirror, held up to remind us of what wealth truly is, the outward reflection of an inward alignment. So let us begin. The first step may surprise you. It is not about money at all. It is about time, patience, and the danger of haste. The very obsession with becoming rich is the obstacle that keeps so many poor. Join me as we explore the first law of Solomon's wisdom: why rushing toward wealth is the surest way to drive it away. Chapter 1. The Obstacle of Wealth. Why rushing blocks abundance? Every culture has told the same cautionary tale. Riches pursued too quickly vanish just as quickly. In the Roman Empire, senators who schemed for instant glory often found themselves disgraced or exiled. In modern times, countless stories surface of lottery winners who, after tasting sudden fortune, fall into ruin, bankrupt, broken, and lonelier than before. The pattern repeats because the law behind it does not change. Wealth forced is wealth lost. Solomon spoke of this plainly. An inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. He had seen with his own eyes what happens when people grasp for gold without grounding in wisdom. Their hands fill for a moment, but like sand, the riches slip away. For him, the true obstacle of wealth was not poverty itself, but the restless spirit of haste, the frantic obsession with becoming rich tomorrow. History confirms this law. Consider Spain during the Age of Conquest. Galleons returned from the New World heavy with gold and silver, flooding Europe with sudden wealth. But instead of building a lasting foundation, much of that fortune dissolved in reckless spending and endless wars. The riches that came too fast vanished, leaving debt and decline. Contrast this with nations that built gradually, investing in institutions, education, and steady trade. Wealth grew more slowly, but endured across centuries. The spiritual principle is clear. Prosperity cannot be seized in haste, because abundance is not a trophy. It is a process. Just as a farmer does not reap in the same season he sows, true wealth demands rhythm, patience, and time. Seeds planted today must be nurtured with care, watered with diligence, and left to grow. No amount of urgency will make an oak tree spring up overnight. And yet, how many of us treat wealth as though it should appear instantly, as though the very universe must yield to our impatience? Solomon himself never chased after riches. His wealth flowed to him. Kings and queens brought gifts, merchants paid tribute, and nations sought his counsel. The Queen of Sheba traveled with caravans of gold and spices, not because Solomon advertised his need, but because his wisdom commanded respect. His abundance was attraction, not pursuit. He had no need to beg or to grasp. His alignment with wisdom drew wealth as naturally as a magnet draws iron. This is the law we must rediscover. The faster you chase money, the faster it runs. The moment it becomes your obsession, you send a signal of lack. Spiritually, obsession declares, "I do not have." And the universe echoes back, "So be it." Gratitude, on the other hand, says, "I have enough today." And to that declaration, the universe responds, "Then more shall be given." You may know this from your own life. Think of the times when you desperately clung to a goal, a deal, or an opportunity, only to watch it slip away. Contrast that with moments when you worked steadily, calmly, without desperation. And suddenly doors opened, opportunities arrived, and help came unasked for. What changed? Not the world, but your state of being. Haste closes the hand. Patience opens it. This does not mean we sit idle. The farmer still plows, still plants, still waters. But he does not scream at the earth to hurry. His effort is steady, not frantic. His faith in the process is unshaken. That is diligence. That is alignment. And that is the soil in which abundance grows. Listen again to the wisdom of history. Jim Rohn, the modern philosopher of success, once said, "The twin killers of success are impatience and greed." He was echoing Solomon without even naming him. Every spiritual tradition agrees. Rushing blinds you, while patience sharpens your sight. Even science reminds us that processes of growth, whether crops, children, or companies, require cycles of time. To demand otherwise is to demand the impossible. But we are tempted, always tempted, by the promise of shortcuts. The lure of overnight wealth whispers, why wait? Why work? Why trust the slow path when luck may crown you king tomorrow? And yet, those who walk that path find that what came in haste departs with sorrow. There is no shortcut to lasting prosperity, because prosperity is not a place, it is a person. It is who you become through the daily practice of patience, gratitude, and wisdom. So, let us speak plainly. The obstacle of wealth is not lack of opportunity, not lack of talent, not even lack of resources. The obstacle is haste. It is the restless spirit that cannot wait, cannot trust, cannot be grateful in the present. That spirit builds castles in the air, but no foundation beneath them. And when the storm comes, as it always does, the castles fall. You must decide, will you pursue the frantic chase, or will you become the calm cultivator? Will you demand instant harvests, or will you sow faithfully and wait for the season to come? Your answer determines not only your wealth, but your peace. For what good is a fortune if it brings anxiety? Better a modest table with joy than a banquet with fear. Solomon himself warned, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. Pause and reflect. Where in your life are you rushing? Where have you mistaken obsession for diligence? Where are you chasing shadows instead of cultivating substance? Identify it, release it, and replace it with gratitude, for gratitude is the rhythm of abundance, and patience is its gatekeeper. The law is unbreakable. To receive faster, you must slow down. To prosper greatly, you must refuse the frantic hunger for prosperity. The calm soul attracts, the desperate soul repels. And so, we close this first chapter with a paradox. To win the race for wealth, you must stop running. You must walk steadily, faithfully, patiently, one day at a time. For true abundance does not respond to haste. It blossoms in peace. Now, let us turn to the next secret of Solomon's wisdom. If haste is the obstacle to wealth, what then is the foundation? The answer is older than kings, older than empires. It is the principle upon which all prosperity must stand, justice and integrity. Chapter 2: The Foundation of Success, Justice and Integrity. Every structure rests on a foundation. No matter how tall, no matter how beautiful, without a solid base, collapse is inevitable. The same is true of life. We can build careers, accumulate possessions, even gain recognition. But if our foundation is corrupt, time will expose the cracks. And when it does, the fall will be swift and painful. King Solomon knew this better than most. His throne, according to the record, was established not by conquest, but by justice. He became famous for wisdom in judgment. You may recall the story of two women who both claimed to be the mother of a child. Solomon, faced with a decision that could have torn his kingdom apart, did not rush to choose one over the other. Instead, he revealed the truth through wisdom and fairness. His verdict was so just that it echoed through the centuries as the very definition of discernment. Justice was not for him an abstract virtue. It was the bedrock of prosperity. He warned, "By justice a king gives a country stability, but those who are greedy for bribes tear it down." In other words, the strength of a nation is not measured by its armies or its treasuries, but by its fairness. Stability, the condition in which prosperity can grow, rests entirely on integrity. History confirms this law. Look at civilizations that built empires on exploitation or corruption. They glimmered for a moment, then fell into ashes. Consider Rome at its height. Its wealth was vast, but as corruption seeped into its senate, as greed overtook virtue, decline became inevitable. Or look at the great stock market collapse of 1929. It was not just economic miscalculation, it was fueled by unchecked speculation, dishonest practices, and greed. Integrity had been abandoned, and collapse followed. Now contrast these failures with examples of lasting prosperity. Think of leaders who commanded loyalty through fairness. Abraham Lincoln, who held a divided nation together not through force alone, but by appealing to conscience. Or Nelson Mandela, who, after decades in prison, refused to retaliate, choosing reconciliation over revenge. Their legacy endured not because they were flawless men, but because they understood justice is the foundation upon which nations, relationships, and wealth must rest. Why does justice matter so much? Because justice is alignment with divine order. Integrity is not just a moral code, it is a spiritual law. When you lie, cheat, or exploit, you fracture your connection to that order. You may gain for a season, but like a house built on sand, the storm will sweep it away. When you act with integrity, you align yourself with the deeper currents of reality. And in that alignment, you find stability, trust, and abundance. Think about it in your own life. Have you ever dealt with someone who broke their word, even in a small matter? Instantly, trust evaporates. You hesitate to rely on them again. On the other hand, when someone consistently keeps their word, you are drawn to them. You seek their presence. You want to work with them. That invisible quality, trust, is wealth. It opens doors that money cannot buy. Integrity builds networks of goodwill that carry you further than cunning ever could. Solomon's wisdom was clear. Riches without justice are fragile. They crumble under their own weight, but justice with even a little wealth creates expansion. Why? Because people will always gather around what is trustworthy. They will support, protect, and add to it. Integrity multiplies. Injustice divides. Now, let us be honest. Acting with integrity is not always easy. There are moments when dishonesty seems like the shorter path, when cutting corners seems efficient, when bending, the truth feels convenient. But remember this, every dishonest gain is a loan with unbearable interest. You may walk away with something in your hand, but it will demand your peace, your reputation, your sleep, and eventually your prosperity. Integrity is slower, yes, but it builds structures that stand for generations. Imagine a foundation stone. You may not see it beneath the building, but without it, nothing holds. That is justice. That is integrity. Invisible, often unnoticed, but holding up everything else. Solomon's reign was prosperous because its foundation was strong. Even his enemies respected him, for they knew his judgments were fair. This is the kind of wealth that cannot be stolen. So I ask you now, what is the foundation of your life? What principles lie beneath your decisions, your work, your relationships? If you removed the glitter of appearances, would you find bedrock or sand? If you wish for abundance that endures, you must lay down stones of honesty, fairness, and truth, even in the smallest matters, especially in the smallest matters. For it is the little cracks, the tiny compromises, that one day cause the greatest collapse. The foundation of success is not luck, nor cleverness, nor even talent alone. It is justice. It is integrity. It is living in such a way that if your deeds were shouted from the rooftops, you would not be ashamed. That is freedom, that is wealth, and that is stability no storm can take away. As Solomon teaches us, prosperity rests on truth, And just as surely, failure rests on its opposite. If justice builds, injustice destroys. If integrity is secured, corruption corrodes. In the next chapter, we will confront the darker side of the law. Why injustice, dishonesty, and oppression are not just moral failings, but the true cause of failure in every age. Chapter 3. The Cause of Failure, Injustice and Disharmony. If justice is the foundation of success, then injustice is the crack in the foundation that brings everything down. No matter how strong a building looks on the outside, once the foundation is compromised, collapse is only a matter of time. The same is true of wealth, nations, and lives. History is filled with the wreckage of those who tried to prosper on the crooked path of dishonesty. Their fall was not random. It was the harvest of injustice. Solomon put it bluntly, "Ill-gotten treasures are of no value, but righteousness delivers from death." He was not simply offering moral advice, he was stating a law of reality. Riches gained unjustly carry within them the seeds of ruin. They may glitter for a season, but their roots are shallow, and sooner or later the storm comes. Look at the great collapses of history. The French monarchy in the 18th century lived in extravagant wealth while the people starved. Palaces overflowed with luxury while the streets ran with hunger. For a time, it seemed untouchable, but injustice eroded its foundation. The revolution came, and with it, the guillotine. Or take the Enron scandal in our own age. For years, the company looked unstoppable, boasting enormous profits. But its success was built on lies. When the truth surfaced, the empire crumbled overnight, leaving lives shattered and fortunes gone. The pattern is always the same. Injustice destroys trust. Dishonesty corrodes relationships. Oppression poisons prosperity. You cannot build abundance on the suffering of others, for the spiritual law is inescapable. What you sow, you reap. Harm returns to the hand that deals it. As Solomon wrote, "Whoever sows injustice reaps calamity." This is what I call the boomerang effect. Every act of injustice, no matter how hidden, circles back. It may take time, it may seem delayed, but like a boomerang thrown into the air, it will return to its sender. You cannot cheat the law of the Spirit. What is unjust weakens. What is dishonest, what is corrupt, decays. The tragedy is that injustice often appears profitable at first. A lie may win a promotion, exploitation may swell a bank account, corruption may purchase influence, but beneath the surface, rot spreads. The lie demands another lie. Exploitation breeds resentment. Corruption erodes trust, until finally, what looked like strength falls into dust. As the Roman writer Publilius Cyrus observed, "The dishonest can delay punishment, but never avoid it." Consider even in your own life. Have you ever bent the truth, cut corners, or acted unfairly, and then found yourself restless, uneasy, always looking over your shoulder? That is the inner poverty injustice creates. It steals peace long before it steals possessions, and eventually the inner unrest shows itself outwardly. Marriages crack, businesses falter, reputations collapse. The fall was always coming, because the foundation was never sound. But let us be clear, injustice is not only about great scandals or political corruption. It can be as subtle as cheating time at work, as quiet as withholding kindness, as hidden as exploiting someone's trust. These small injustices are cracks in the foundation. Leave them unattended, and one day the whole house leans, then falls. Failure, then, is not bad luck. It is not the anger of fate. It is the fruit of injustice. When we violate integrity toward ourselves, toward others, toward God, we set in motion a chain of consequences that no wealth can prevent. Injustice destroys from the inside out. But here lies hope. Just as injustice multiplies ruin, justice multiplies prosperity. The same spiritual law that punishes dishonesty rewards fairness. The same universe that returns harm also returns blessings. Align yourself with justice, and you will not need to fear collapse. You will stand firm when others fall. So I ask you, are there places in your life where you are tempted by the illusion of unjust gain, where the promise of a shortcut whispers louder than the call of integrity? Recognize it for what it is, not a blessing, but a trap. For Solomon's wisdom is as true now as it was 3,000 years ago. Injustice is the cause of failure, always. As we close this chapter, remember this. You do not need to chase failure. It comes automatically when injustice rules your choices, but you can choose differently. You can walk in harmony with the law of justice, and in doing so, build something that endures. And so, let us turn to the positive law that lifts rather than destroys. If injustice is the cause of failure, then what is the key to glory? The answer lies in wisdom, the spiritual light that opens every door. In the next chapter, we will discover why wisdom, more than riches, more than strength, is the crown jewel of prosperity. Chapter 4. The Key to Glory. Wisdom as Spiritual Light. If wealth gained unjustly ends in ruin, then what raises a life to true greatness? What transforms prosperity from mere possession into lasting glory? For Solomon, the answer was never gold or power. It was wisdom. He declared, "Wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her." When Solomon asked for wisdom instead of riches, something remarkable happened. Not only did he receive understanding, but wealth and influence followed as natural consequences. Kings and queens traveled to hear him speak. The Queen of Sheba brought caravans of gold, spices, and jewels, not merely because Solomon was rich, but because he was wise. His words were treasures greater than the gifts she carried. She said, "The half was not told to me. Your wisdom and prosperity exceed the fame I heard." Glory followed wisdom, as light follows dawn. History supports this truth. Look at the Renaissance, a time when Europe emerged from the shadows of ignorance. What lit the way was not sudden wealth, but wisdom rediscovered, knowledge of art, science, and philosophy. Wealth followed as cities flourished, trade expanded, and culture blossomed. Or consider modern innovators. Steve Jobs, for example, did not become iconic by chasing money, but by pursuing wisdom in design, technology, and human experience. The result was not just riches, but global influence, glory born from insight. Knowledge alone is not wisdom. Many educated but foolish people exist. Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge. It is the capacity to recognize the way, while others just perceive uncertainty. Opportunities and threats are revealed by the light. Wealth becomes a burden if one lacks insight. Even modest resources can grow into plenty when used wisely. Consider wealth and power as tools that could be used to smash down the barred door that is life. However, the master key is wisdom. It opens the door easily and without causing any damage. When others battle with force, wisdom enables you to enter with grace. For this reason, Solomon said that battles are won by intelligence rather than power. You can fight your war with wise counsel, and there is victory when there are many counselors. But wisdom does not come cheaply. It requires humility, the willingness to admit what we do not know. Socrates, revered in Athens, became the father of philosophy not because he claimed to know everything, but because he confessed, "I know that I know nothing." That confession opened the door to endless learning. Pride closes the mind. Humility opens it, and only an open mind receives wisdom. Here lies a profound spiritual truth. Wisdom is not hidden from us, but offered to us. The book of Proverbs personifies wisdom as a woman standing in the streets, crying aloud, inviting all to listen. The barrier is not her silence, but our deafness. Too often we hurry. Too often we think we already know. Too often we refuse correction. And so we stumble in darkness, while wisdom calls us into light. Reflect on your own life. How many mistakes came not because you lacked resources, but because you lacked wisdom? How many times did haste, pride, or stubbornness blind you to the counsel that could have saved you? And how many blessings arrived when you paused, listened, reflected, and chose the wiser path? Wisdom is the crown of glory because it transforms wealth into blessing. Money without wisdom breeds arrogance, waste, and destruction. But money guided by wisdom feeds the hungry, builds communities, creates innovations, and blesses generations. Wisdom elevates wealth from possession to purpose. That is why Solomon said, "Wisdom gives life to those who have it." So how do we seek wisdom? First, by listening. Listen to the experiences of others, to the lessons of history, to the quiet voice of conscience, and to the counsel of those who have walked the path before us. Second, by reflection. The unexamined life repeats mistakes. The examined life learns from them. Third, by humility, acknowledging our ignorance so that understanding may enter. And finally, by prayer or meditation, turning inward to the source of wisdom, where light is given to those who ask with sincerity. Remember, wisdom is not a trophy you display once earned. It is a daily practice. It grows with you as long as you remain teachable. The wise never stop learning. The foolish believe they have learned enough. As we close this chapter, keep this in mind. Glory is not the applause of crowds, nor the glitter of gold. Glory is the radiance of wisdom lived out in daily choices. It is the light that guides your steps and inspires others to follow. True greatness is not found in power, but in the wisdom to use power rightly. And so we turn to the next lesson. If wisdom is the crown of glory, what then is the origin of ruin? If light elevates, what darkness pulls us down? In the following chapter, we will confront the silent enemy that destroys more lives than poverty ever could. Negligence of the self. For the greatest downfall is not being defeated by others, but being careless with one's own soul. Chapter 5. The Origin of Ruin, Neglect of the Self. The greatest enemy you will ever face is not outside you. It is not a rival, not an oppressor, not even the cruel turns of fortune. The greatest enemy lives within. It is your own negligence, your failure to govern yourself. Solomon expressed this with piercing clarity. Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. In his eyes, the conqueror of nations was less impressive than the conqueror of self. Why? Because without self-mastery, even the mightiest empire crumbles. History offers countless examples. Alexander the Great, a man who subdued kingdoms from Greece to India, died in his 30s, undone not by an enemy's sword, but by his own excesses. He could command armies, but not his appetites. His empire fractured soon after, because its foundation was not discipline, but ambition. Or look to Rome, where generals who triumphed abroad often brought ruin home through pride, indulgence, and unchecked power. Time and again the story repeats. Those who fail to rule themselves cannot rule for long. Negligence is subtle. It does not arrive as an enemy storming the gates. It seeps in quietly, like weeds in an untended garden. Neglect your thoughts, and fear grows. Neglect your words and lies slip in. Neglect your habits and vices take root. Neglect your spirit and emptiness spreads. Ruin is rarely sudden. It is the slow decay of what was left uncared for. Think of a house. Leave it unattended, and the weather begins its work. A small leak in the roof, ignored, rots the beams. Dust gathers, pests creep in, cracks widen. From a distance, the house may still look intact, but step inside and you see the collapse already underway. So it is with the soul. The cracks of negligence are invisible at first, but they grow until one day, without warning, the whole structure falls. Spiritually, negligence is forgetting that your life is sacred. It is treating your mind as though it does not matter what you feed it, your body as though it can bear endless abuse, and your conscience as though it does not matter what you feed it, it can be silenced without cost. But there is always a cost. Every neglected thought, every ungoverned impulse, every ignored warning accumulates interest until the debt must be paid. The path to ruin often looks harmless. It may even look pleasant. The person who puts off reflection, who dismisses the need for discipline, who shrugs at the little compromises, tells himself, it doesn't matter. It's only small, but Solomon warns, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. The ruin creeps in while we are asleep to our own negligence. Ask yourself honestly, where have you neglected your own life? Perhaps you have been faithful in work, but careless with your family. Perhaps you have pursued wealth, but neglected your health. Perhaps you have cultivated intellect, but ignored the soul. Every form of neglect weakens us, and eventually the world outside reflects the weakness inside. But here is the hope. If negligence is the origin of ruin, then attention is the origin of renewal. To tend the garden of your soul is to protect your prosperity. To guard your thoughts is to guard your future. To exercise discipline, to choose patience, to govern words and actions. This is to lay a foundation that cannot be shaken. Self-mastery is not the denial of joy. It is the protection of joy from being stolen by chaos. Solomon understood this deeply. His wisdom did not shield him from error. Later in life, distracted by indulgence, he neglected the very foundations he once built. His kingdom fractured after his death. Even the wisest man faltered when negligence crept in. His story is a warning, but also an invitation. If even Solomon could stumble through neglect, how much more must we guard ourselves with vigilance? Self-governance is not about perfection, it is about awareness. It is about choosing daily to watch over your inner life with care, knowing that wealth, influence, and success are fragile unless the soul is strong. Without self-mastery, abundance becomes a curse. With self-mastery, even modest means become a blessing. So let me leave you with this truth. You cannot escape the responsibility of ruling yourself. You are a kingdom, and your thoughts, words, and actions are your subjects. Govern them with wisdom, or they will overthrow you with folly. Negligence is rebellion within, and its end is ruin. Attention is sovereignty within, and its end is peace. As we turn to the next chapter, remember this. Prosperity is not merely avoiding ruin, but actively cultivating abundance. And the path to abundance, Solomon reminds us, is paved with diligence and discipline. Let us now discover why steady devotion to purpose is the true road to lasting wealth. Chapter 6. The Path to Abundance, Diligence and Discipline. Abundance is never an accident. It does not fall from the sky like sudden rain. It is cultivated, step by step, choice by choice, in the rhythm of diligence. Solomon declared it simply, The hand of the diligent will rule, while the lazy will be put to forced labor. In his wisdom, abundance is not the reward of luck, but the harvest of steady devotion. Think of the farmer. He does not reap by wishing. He plows, sows, waters, and waits. Grain by grain, season after season, his diligence feeds not only his household, but entire communities. The farmer does not imagine a harvest without labor, and yet how many of us imagine prosperity without the same discipline? Solomon reminds us, wealth comes little by little. It is patience in action. History gives us countless witnesses. Thomas Edison, asked about his failures, said he had not failed 10,000 times, but discovered 10,000 ways that did not work. His persistence lit the world. Or think of Warren Buffett, whose fortune grew not from reckless haste, but from quiet consistency, year after year. Their stories echo Solomon's law. Abundance is the child of diligence. Spiritually, diligence is more than hard work. It is devotion. To be diligent is to treat your labor as sacred, as an offering to God. It is to rise each day and say, "What I do today, I do with excellence, even if no one sees." Discipline is not punishment. It is alignment. It aligns your energy with your purpose. Without it, life scatters. With it, life gathers and multiplies. Contrast diligence with its opposite. Laziness does not arrive as a roaring lion. It creeps in as small excuses. I will do it tomorrow. I will start when I feel like it. I will wait for inspiration. Days slip into weeks, and the field remains uncultivated. Solomon warned, "Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but whoever follows worthless pursuits lacks sense." In other words, diligence feeds, distraction starves. But let us not confuse diligence with frantic busyness. Many run fast and achieve little. True diligence is focused. It knows priorities. It builds steadily. It is the craftsman who perfects his skill year after year, the teacher who shapes young minds patiently, the leader who chooses consistency over spectacle. Abundance is not the fruit of restless energy, but of steady attention. Examine your own life. Where has diligence been replaced by distraction? Where has discipline been surrendered to impulse? Perhaps you begin projects with zeal, but abandon them halfway. Perhaps you scatter your focus across too many pursuits. Perhaps you wait for ideal conditions that never come. Solomon would counsel you, start where you are with what you have, and tend it faithfully. The small field, well cultivated, yields more than vast lands left idle. The spiritual power of diligence is this: it transforms the ordinary into extraordinary. A single act, repeated faithfully, shapes destiny. Daily prayer deepens into communion with God. Daily savings grow into freedom. Daily kindness builds relationships of trust. What seems small today becomes mighty tomorrow. The river carves the canyon not through force, but through persistence. Abundance, then, is not a sudden windfall, but a steady current. It is the fruit of diligence, the companion of discipline. To walk this path is to embrace responsibility, to resist distraction, to honor the work of each day. Solomon's reign shone with prosperity, not because he sought quick victories, but because he built patiently, organizing, teaching, and guiding his people with consistency. So here is the choice. Will you walk the slow, steady path of diligence, or chase the fleeting illusions of luck? One road is narrow but secure. The other is wide but ends in emptiness. The diligent hand may seem slow, but it rules in the end. The lazy hand may seem clever, but it is enslaved. As we close this chapter, remember, abundance is not found in sudden fortune. It is found in the quiet victory of showing up, of doing the work, of living each day with discipline. The world may not applaud consistency, but heaven honors it, and abundance flows to those who honor their purpose with steady devotion. And now, let us face the shadow side of this law. If diligence builds abundance, what destroys it? In the next chapter, we will uncover the great snare that has trapped countless lives, the spiritual poverty born of laziness and inertia. Chapter 7. The Trap of Poverty, Laziness and Inertia. Poverty is not always the absence of resources. Often, it is the absence of movement, the absence of action, the absence of discipline. Solomon described it with haunting clarity. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you, like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Poverty creeps in silently, like weeds in an abandoned field, and before long, it overgrows everything. The trap of poverty is not simply an external circumstance, it is internal inertia. Laziness is not rest, it is resistance to divine flow. Rest restores, but laziness withers. One revives strength, the other drains it. The field left uncultivated does not remain neutral, it grows thorns. The life left untended does not remain stable, it declines. History shows us this truth again and again. Great civilizations collapsed, not only because of enemies at the gates, but because decadence and idleness weakened them from within. Rome, once disciplined, became indulgent. Its citizens, who once labored with rigor, began demanding bread and circuses, entertainment without effort. The empire rotted long before it was conquered. Laziness paved the way for its fall. On the personal level, the same pattern unfolds. Think of talents wasted not because they were absent, but because they were never developed. How many musicians never played? How many thinkers never wrote? How many entrepreneurs never built because inertia held them captive? The tragedy of poverty is not what is taken away, but what is never brought forth. Spiritually, laziness is a refusal of stewardship. Life is a gift, entrusted to us like a vineyard. To refuse to cultivate it is to dishonor the giver. The lazy soul tells itself, "Tomorrow I will begin. Tomorrow I will rise. Tomorrow I will change," but tomorrow never comes. Days drift into years, and potential dies unrealized. Poverty does not strike suddenly. It accumulates slowly, like dust, until it suffocates. And here is the deception. Laziness feels safe. It feels comfortable. The bed is warm. The excuses are soothing. The delay feels harmless. Yet this comfort is a trap. Solomon warns that poverty arrives like a thief. It comes unannounced, uninvited, yet with devastating force. By the time the lazy awaken, the harvest is gone, the opportunities vanished, the strength wasted. But let us not confuse this truth. Poverty itself is not always a sign of laziness. Many endure hardship through no fault of their own. The wisdom of Solomon is not a condemnation of the poor, but a warning to the negligent. For even in hardship, diligence preserves dignity, while laziness compounds despair. The true trap of poverty is not lack of possessions, but lack of movement, lack of care, lack of effort. So how do we escape this trap? By choosing action, however small. The ant, Solomon reminds us, has no ruler, no overseer, yet it prepares its food in summer and gathers its supplies in harvest. Tiny, unnoticed, yet diligent. The ant teaches us that steady effort builds security, while laziness leaves you empty-handed. The smallest daily steps free you from the grip of inertia. Look into your own life. Where have you allowed laziness to whisper later? Where have you folded your hands when you should have labored? Where have you mistaken delay for safety? The field of your life is waiting. If you do not plant, weeds will. If you will not build, decay will. You cannot remain neutral. The trap of poverty is real, but so is the escape. Each day you rise to your work with gratitude, and each time you resist the lure of idleness, you break its chains. Each act of diligence is a key, unlocking abundance. God has placed in you seeds of potential. Laziness buries them. Action awakens them. As we close this chapter, remember, rest is sacred, but laziness is betrayal. The soul that rests finds renewal. The soul that neglects finds ruin. Choose diligence over delay, movement over inertia, and your life will flourish like a well-tended field. And now we move to a brighter law, the counterbalance to poverty. If laziness steals, what multiplies? The answer is generosity. In the next chapter, we will uncover why giving is not loss, but the seed of growth, the spiritual principle that transforms scarcity into abundance. Chapter 8. The Seed of Growth, Generosity and Circulation. If laziness locks life in stagnation, generosity sets it in motion. Prosperity does not grow by hoarding, but by circulating. Solomon captured this in a single line. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. In his vision, giving is not subtraction, it is multiplication. Think of a seed. If you cling to it, guard it, hide it away, it remains what it is, one seed, small and limited. But if you release it into the soil, you risk losing it. For a time it seems gone, yet in its death, life begins. Roots stretch, stems rise, and soon, one seed has become a field. So it is with generosity. What you give is never lost. It is planted, and in due time, it returns multiplied. History affirms this truth. Consider the great philanthropists of the modern world. Andrew Carnegie built libraries across the nation. His fortune continues to educate generations long after his death. Or look to someone like Mother Teresa, who possessed little but gave her time, her presence, her compassion. Her legacy is richer than gold. Their lives testify to the law Solomon taught. What is released in generosity never dies. It circulates, blesses, and grows. But generosity is not measured only in money. It is measured in spirit. To be generous is to give time when it is easier to turn away, to give kindness when indifference would suffice, to give forgiveness when vengeance tempts. Each act is a seed. Each seed enlarges the soul. Generosity does not only multiply wealth, it multiplies joy, peace, and meaning. The opposite is also true. Withholding shrinks the soul. Fear says, I cannot afford to give. If I release this, I will have less. But fear blinds us to the law of circulation. Stagnant water breeds decay. Flowing water refreshes. Money, kindness, talent. When hoarded, they rot. When shared, they renew. Ask yourself, when have you given freely, without expectation, and found yourself richer afterward? Perhaps not always richer in money, but richer in spirit, in relationships, in unexpected opportunities. Generosity aligns us with abundance itself. It tells the universe, there is enough. And the universe answers, then more shall come. Spiritually, generosity is an act of trust. To give is to declare that your source is not your bank account, not your possessions, but God, the infinite giver. When you give, you align with His nature, for He is abundance. Every sunrise, every breath, every heartbeat is a gift. To be generous is to live in harmony with the divine rhythm of giving. Solomon's wisdom reminds us, even the poor can be generous. Generosity is not the privilege of the wealthy, it is the calling of the human spirit. The widow who gave 2 small coins, recorded in the Gospel, gave more than all the rich, because she gave from the heart. The measure of generosity is not the size of the gift, but the spirit behind it. Consider, too, the generational impact. A generous act today plants a seed that your children or grandchildren may harvest. A scholarship, a kind word, a helping hand may ripple through lives you will never see. This is why Solomon called generosity a path to growth. Its fruit is often unseen, but never absent. But let us not mistake generosity for carelessness. To give wisely is to plant in fertile soil. To give blindly may feed waste. True generosity is guided by wisdom, helping not to create dependency, but to awaken potential, giving not for applause, but from love. Such generosity is inexhaustible, for it draws from a source that cannot be depleted. As we close this chapter, remember, you are always sowing. Every word, every act, every gift is a seed. Sow fear, and you reap scarcity. Sow generosity, and you reap abundance. The law is universal and unbreakable. So ask yourself, what seeds are you planting today? Are you clinging to your handful of seeds, or are you sowing them into the fields of life, trusting they will return in a harvest of blessing? Generosity is the seed of growth. Circulation is the breath of prosperity. Give, and you will not diminish, you will expand. Hold back, and you will not secure, you will wither. And now, let us turn to the enemies of this law. While generosity multiplies, there are forces that devour wealth before it can grow. In the next chapter, we will confront the pleasures that poison, the vices that masquerade as abundance, but in truth drain the soul and destroy prosperity. Chapter 9. The Enemies of Prosperity. Pleasures that Poison. Every garden that flourishes must also be guarded. Seeds of generosity, diligence, and wisdom can be planted with care, but if weeds are allowed to spread unchecked, they choke the life out of the harvest. In the same way, prosperity is not only built by virtues, it is destroyed by vices. Solomon, who tasted both wisdom and folly, warned that whoever loves pleasure will become poor, whoever loves wine and oil will never be rich. He had seen how indulgence, left unchecked, devours abundance. Pleasure itself is not the enemy. God created beauty, rest, and joy. Music, food, companionship, and celebration, all are good when received with gratitude. The danger lies in the love of pleasure, the dependence on it, the pursuit of it as an end in itself. When pleasure becomes master rather than servant, it turns poisonous. What was meant to refresh begins to enslave. History is heavy with such lessons. The decline of mighty Rome is often traced not only to external invasions, but to internal decay. Gladiatorial games, banquets of excess, and unbridled indulgence weakened the discipline that once made the empire great. Pleasure, disguised as prosperity, hollowed the core. Closer to our own time, consider the fall of once powerful individuals, undone not by poverty, but by addiction, leaders, artists, and entrepreneurs who gained the world, but lost their souls in the grip of alcohol, drugs, greed, or lust. Why do vices hold such power? Because they promise fulfillment, but deliver emptiness. They whisper, "This will make you whole," yet leave you emptier than before. Each indulgence demands a greater one. Each appetite, once fed without restraint, grows hungrier. The satisfaction diminishes even as the craving intensifies. This is the poison of false pleasure. It consumes without ever filling. Solomon knew this well. Though he began with wisdom, his later years were marked by indulgence. Hundreds of wives and concubines, vast palaces, lavish feasts. Yet he confessed in Ecclesiastes, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. His own life stands as a warning. Unchecked pleasure does not create joy, it erases it. Spiritually, the love of pleasure is a form of idolatry. It places created things above the Creator, temporary sensations above eternal truth. Pleasure pursued as ultimate becomes a counterfeit God, and like all idols, it demands sacrifice. It sacrifices health, relationships, integrity, and eventually prosperity itself. What begins as enjoyment ends as enslavement. The enemies of prosperity wear many masks. Greed pretends to be ambition, lust disguises itself as love, gluttony calls itself a celebration, laziness masquerades as rest. Yet beneath every mask lies the same truth, a slow erosion of the soul. Prosperity cannot thrive where the soil is poisoned by these vices, but the cure is not asceticism, not a joyless denial of life's gifts. The cure is order. Pleasures, kept in their rightful place, refresh and renew. A glass of wine shared with friends can be holy. Drunkenness that enslaves is destructive. A meal savored with gratitude strengthens the body. Gluttony that seeks escape weakens it. Companionship, when rooted in love, is life-giving. Lust, when pursued as consumption, is soul-destroying. Wisdom does not forbid joy, it guards it. Ask yourself, where have pleasures in your life crossed the line from servant to master? Where has enjoyment turned into dependence? Where has a gift begun to poison? Be honest, for denial is the ally of destruction, but honesty is the beginning of freedom. Remember, prosperity is not only about what you add, it is about what you resist. Guard your heart as you would guard a garden. Pull out the weeds early before they spread. Choose joy over indulgence, gratitude over greed, moderation over excess. True joy is sustainable. False pleasure is fleeting. One multiplies prosperity, the other devours it. As we close this chapter, take Solomon's counsel to heart. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Joy rooted in wisdom outlasts riches rooted in indulgence. Guard your soul, and you guard your abundance. Now let us turn to the final key that secures greatness. If vice is poison, what virtue protects? Solomon tells us that above wealth, above glory, above all achievements, humility is the guide to true greatness. In the next chapter, we will discover why the humble are lifted high and why pride, no matter how mighty, always precedes the fall. Chapter 10. The Guide to Greatness. Humility, Pride, and the Source. Every rise in history carries with it a silent question. Will it endure, or will it fall? Solomon himself warned, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." He had seen it in kings, in nations, and tragically in his own story. For if wisdom builds and justice sustains, pride erodes and humility alone preserves. Humility is not weakness, it is under control. It is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking rightly of yourself, seeing your life as a gift, your wealth as a trust, your position as service. Pride declares, "I am the source." Humility whispers, "I am the steward." And that whisper holds more power than the loudest boast. History offers sobering lessons. Consider Napoleon, who crowned himself emperor, declaring independence even from the church that anointed kings. His conquests seemed unstoppable until pride led him to overreach in Russia, and the same world that trembled before him watched him exiled and broken. Contrast this with leaders like Abraham Lincoln, who wore power with humility, who called himself an imperfect servant, and found greatness not in domination, but in service. Pride builds statues that topple. Humility builds legacies that endure. Even Solomon, the wisest of kings, stumbled when pride crept in. Surrounded by wealth, luxury, and alliances, he turned his heart from the source of his wisdom. He built temples not only for God, but for foreign idols, and in his later years, his kingdom began to fracture. His story stands as both inspiration and warning. Wisdom without humility cannot be sustained. Why is humility so essential? Because it keeps us connected to the source. All prosperity, all wisdom, all life flows from God. To forget this is to sever the root that nourishes us. A tree cut from its roots may stand tall for a moment, but its fall is inevitable. Pride is the axe. Humility is the soil that keeps us grounded. Spiritually, humility is alignment. It is remembering that we are not creators of the universe, but participants in it. That we do not own abundance, but channel it. That our breath, our gifts, our opportunities are entrusted to us for a purpose greater than ourselves. Humility recognizes that wealth is not for hoarding, but for serving, not for boasting, but for blessing. Think of the ocean. Rivers rush into it, but it remains low. Because it stays low, it receives them all. The proud mountain may stand tall, but the waters flow away from it. Humility, like the ocean, receives abundance precisely because it does not exalt itself. To be humble is to stay open, to stay receptive, to stay teachable. And in that posture, life pours blessings freely. Pride, on the other hand, blinds. It convinces us we already know that we are self-sufficient, that we owe nothing to anyone. Pride isolates us from others and from God. And isolation is the beginning of downfall. The proud stumble not because others strike them down, but because they walk with their eyes lifted too high to see the pit before them. So where does greatness truly lie? Not in power, but in humility. Not in boasting, but in service. Jesus himself echoed Solomon's wisdom when he told his followers, "Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." Greatness is not grasped, it is granted to the humble of heart. Ask yourself, in your own life, where has pride whispered, "This is yours, you did this, you are enough without others, without God"? And where has humility reminded you, "This is gift, this is grace, this is trust"? Which voice have you listened to? The answer determines whether your prosperity will endure or collapse. As we close this journey, let us return to the beginning. Solomon asked not for riches, but for wisdom, and because he sought wisdom, abundance followed. Yet even the wisest fell when humility was lost. His life, like all of ours, is both a promise and a warning. Seek wisdom, live with justice, labor with diligence, give with generosity, guard against vice, and above all, walk humbly with God. Do this, and your life will not only prosper, it will shine with a glory that no storm can extinguish. The guide to greatness is humility, the warning of ruin is pride, and the source of all is God, who gives freely to those who walk in alignment with his ways. So let us end where all true prosperity begins, not in our own strength, but in reverence. For as Solomon himself declared, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Epilogue: Walking Solomon's Path. We have walked together through 10 spiritual laws of wealth, drawn from the wisdom of Solomon and echoed across history. Each law has revealed not just a principle for prosperity, but a mirror for the soul. Wealth, we have discovered, is not first about possessions, but about alignment, with wisdom, with justice, with diligence, with humility, with God. Think back on the path we've taken. We began by unmasking the great obstacle of wealth, haste and obsession, the frantic chase that drives riches away. We learned that prosperity must be cultivated patiently, like a seed in the earth. Then we laid the foundation, justice and integrity, the bedrock upon which all abundance rests. We saw how injustice, however tempting, always leads to failure, and how wisdom, the light of the Spirit, is the true crown of glory. We faced the silent enemy of negligence, the ruin that comes when we fail to govern ourselves, and we embraced the path of diligence, where steady discipline builds abundance. We warned against the trap of laziness and inertia, which slowly strangles potential, and then we turned to the law of generosity, discovering that giving is never a loss, but the seed of growth. We confronted the enemies of prosperity, pleasures that poison when pursued without restraint, and finally, we arrived at the summit. Humility, the guide to greatness, the virtue that keeps us connected to the source. Pride leads to downfall, humility leads to enduring glory. All of these truths converge on one reality. God is the fountain from which wisdom, justice, diligence, generosity, and humility flow. Cut yourself off from that source, and even riches become empty. Remain connected, and even modest means become abundant. History confirms what Solomon declared 3,000 years ago. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Reverence for the divine is the first step toward alignment, and alignment is the true definition of prosperity. For what does it profit a man, Jesus later asked, to gain the whole world but lose his soul? So, dear listener, the question now is not whether these laws are true. They have stood the test of time. The question is whether you will walk them. Will you show patience instead of haste? Will you build on integrity instead of compromise? Will you choose diligence over distraction, generosity over fear, humility over pride? Your answers will shape not only your fortune, but your life. Wealth is not chased. It is attracted by who you become. You do not force abundance. You align with it. And when you align with the spiritual laws of prosperity, your life becomes a river, flowing, refreshing, nourishing others, and never running dry. As this journey ends, let me leave you with a blessing. May you walk in wisdom and therefore attract abundance. May you stand on justice and therefore remain unshaken. May you labor with diligence, give with generosity, live with humility, and remain always rooted in the source of all good things. And may your wealth, whether in possessions, in peace, or in purpose, become a light that blesses not only you, but everyone you touch. For this is the true legacy of Solomon's path, prosperity not as mere riches, but as a life aligned with the eternal.